Welcome to the Evolution Security Podcast, where we evolve and learn together. Eric, this is one of the main reasons why we started this show, and to echo somebody we've just spoke with, we kind of do this selfishly too, don't we, bro? The people we get to talk to and learn from, it's just a blast and a blessing. So
we pinch ourselves
tonight, bro?
All the time.
How you doing,
brother?
Doing
wonderful. Doing wonderful. I'm always excited to hang out, with my twin brother from a distance, and then we got a special guest that's been on our list for some time. So we're really glad to have him.
This is a real exciting episode for us because we are big fans of the Shivworks collective and have learned a ton from those gentlemen, and we're excited because we've had Craig Douglas on. I'll just list off the Shivworks collective. We've had Craig Douglas on. We've had Larry Lindemann on. We've had Paul Sharp on, and the late great amazing Dr. William April. Rest in peace, buddy. And then Cecil Birch. And then now, finally, we've collected the whole bunch. Chris Fry. How you doing, brother? Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm doing good. Thanks, guys. Great to finally get on the show and meet you two.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
It's excellent. We've talked multiple times about having you on. We've tried to make it work a few times. The time got away from us, but the stars aligned, and here we are. We get to bring you on and learn from you and present you to our audience. That, I'll tell you what, these concepts, the combatives, and what we're actually going to talk about here today is really our bread and butter. And our audience loves it when we have guests on like you. So, Chris, do us a favor and why don't you give us a bit of background on you and just introduce yourself.
Sure. I use my standard rote intro. I'm a civilian. I've never been law enforcement, never been military. I grew up in New York State doing martial arts since I was a young man. And ran into some trouble when I was, a young man, and had some bad incidents, experienced some violence in a couple cases, empty hand, and a couple guys been stabbed and slashed, and some things that I never, want to ever happen again. And those incidents influenced me to keep training and look for better ways to protect myself and others. And so after, I think my first black belt when I was 15, I started looking into Filipino martial arts. I was out of college early, had 2 degrees and 3 years, and I was in the workforce when I was 20 years old. And
wow.
So with that, I had a little bit of money and lived in Ithaca, New York, and I started just training in Filipino martial arts and a little bit of Muay Thai and Jeet Kune Do, and met a very good mutual friend of ours that you guys have trained with, Mike Brown. And Mike and I trained together for several years until he ended up graduating from Cornell and moving away. But what really changed how I look at training, again, kind of a pivotal aha moment, was through some forums. I had the ability to meet Craig Douglas and the other guys from the Shivworks crew. And in 2005, I did a private ECQC with Craig. Our schedules, I started my company, MDTS Training, on the East Coast in 1998. And I was pretty busy at that time. One thing I kind of did different than a lot of people at that time in the industry was one-day classes. My clientele on the East Coast, that was what people gravitated towards. 2-day classes weren't a big seller. And so I traveled all over the East Coast doing primarily one-day classes. And because of my schedule, I could never get to an ECQC. I knew Craig through the forums and followed him. And anyway, Craig agreed, and I went down to Mississippi. And for 2 days, he had a couple of his SWAT officers, beat me up and shoot me. And it was another pivotal, changing point for me in my training. And so the stuff that I had been doing up to that point was great. I loved it. I'm a martial artist at heart, but I saw a lot of it, just like when I had experienced some violence, I saw a lot of what I had previously learned not work the way I wanted it to work or be as effective. And so I started, doing ECQC with Craig, and for the last 17 years, I've worked with Craig and others. I've got about 1,000 hours or more now of professional firearms training from different people in the industry. And I've done ECQC now at least 10 times, EWO a bunch of times, and then I've hosted Craig and helped him coach a bunch of times. I'm one of 5 people I think Craig is certified. I have certificate number 5 as a multidisciplinary instructor under Craig.
Cool.
And I've been part of the Shivworks collective with the guys and had a chance to, input my thoughts on different things here and there. I ran my company. I still own MDTS, but a few years ago I transitioned out here I wanted to get out of New York, and I came out here to Progressive Force Concepts in Nevada. I ran MDTS for 22 years and probably coached and saw shoot and fight and stab and do different things about 20,000+ students in that time. So a significant amount of coaching experience and teaching experience. And when I came here to PFC, I had been friends with PFC for quite a long time. They were one of the companies that I had trained with a lot during the years that I was out there actively training. I averaged about 100 hours a year with different training providers, and PFC was a big one in my background. And I came on as a senior director of training, so I oversee all training here at the group of companies that PFC encompasses. We have an EP wing, and then we have a training division, we have a gear division, we have a CrossFit gym, we have a concierge division, and we have a federal contracting division. And so I oversee training for everybody in all the divisions and work with a cadre of 5 other instructors. And I've done a little bit of EP work for them. I've been an adjunct instructor for PFC since 2003. And along with all that, I still study martial arts. I have black belts or instructor certifications in a bunch of different things: JKD, Filipino martial arts, a couple different karate styles, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's me.
Well, Chris, it's certainly, you're a humble guy. Just before pre-show, during pre-show, I should say, you kind of stated you felt like you are not necessarily an expert, but I really believe that your resume and your reputation, I believe, proves that you are an expert. So it's awesome to hear your humility, and I'll preface how we're going to start this conversation with, it's amazing how when we meet certain people, how impactful it can be the rest of your life. And so again, you mentioned Mike Brown, and Mike Brown is who actually pushed me to contact you. And we spoke about this, that I had kind of forgot that you and I had spoke quite a bit, when I was out in New York, and we just kind of didn't lose track of, speaking and whatnot. We just, never got the chance to connect. But here we are now, and we've kind of interacted in the virtual world, and all of our mentors that we've studied with to this point are all your best of friends. So again, just that introduction of Mike pushing me to train with Craig, that got Aaron involved with ECQC, and Craig and the other collective members that he's trained with. William April, I hadn't had that opportunity, unfortunately. But again, there's kind of the fact that Mike pushed me into this direction and how it's affected my life, and it's who I am now, and I kind of hear that from you as well. But that kind of boils down to Mike pushing me to get into multidisciplinary training. He's like, you've done some grappling. You've done this Muay Thai, the Filipino martial arts. At that point, I was well on my way to, Mike brought me to master class in IDPA. I do not shoot that level right now just because I choose to work in other areas. But again, he's the one that pushed me in that direction. And for the audience members out there, Chris really flipped the tables on us when we started talking about the subjects. Very seldom do we have guests do that. And so we're going to kind of become part of the interview this evening with Chris. And Chris, I'd like to ask you, what is multidisciplinary training in your definition?
So I come from my while I was running my company and doing all the stuff that I previously mentioned, I also worked in the health field for 25 years. And multidisciplinary is a term used in the health industry quite often, and it denotes combining or involving several different academic disciplines or professions or specializations in an approach to one topic or a problem. So a lot of times we would look at multidisciplinary cancer treatment. The oncologist is working with the pathologist, working with the general practitioner. With what we're talking about today and personal protection training, multidisciplinary training is combining the different disciplines that make a well-rounded person that can protect themselves and others. That's how I always look at it for myself. And so there's those disciplines that we choose to study to become well-rounded might vary from person to person. You mentioned IDPA and shooting, and others, for example, context matters, right? You're in the military, right, Eric? So, being a rifleman is a supreme skill for a military person, right? And when you're on base, when you're deployed, I know you've deployed, that rifle that's your go-to,
Absolutely.
right? But me as a let's see, I can't even do the math this quickly, but I've had a CCW since I was 18. And me as a CCW carrier since I was literally 18 years old, and now I'm going to be 53. I shoot rifles. I've done a significant amount of training with rifles, but me concealed carrying a gun takes higher precedence or prioritization for me as compared to you being in the military. If it was a law enforcement officer, their prioritization of the different disciplines might be a little bit different. Theirs might be, some type of muck, what Craig calls managing unknown contacts, or interviewing a subject or criminal, into going into some tactics with partner tactics, restraint and control, and then if things escalate, moving into less lethal, and then into lethal tool use, right? So there's a lot of different disciplines that if you truly want to be prepared for not every eventuality, but as many as you can prepare for, then you need to study them all, train in them all, and ultimately practice them all if you want it to be there when you need it. So again, a good example would be, look at a police officer. They wear a bat belt with a gun, a taser, a baton, handcuffs. Those all require training in each one of those. And, it's the same for me as a concealed carrier. I need physical skills. I need good verbal skills to deal with whatever problems I can. So I have a list of the things that I study and the different disciplines that I have trained in and try to practice. But my point to all this is your list might differ, might be a little bit different, and your prioritization of that list might be a little bit different. The main thing is that we understand we need it.
Well, and Chris, just full disclosure, I'm a dirty civilian now, although I am absolutely employed by the Army still. But yes, the rifle still is a high priority for me,
Yeah.
depending on where I'm going. But yeah, and because excuse me, you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And so to give you some ideas of my prioritization right now, because, you know, it's tough to get it all in. I mean, for a long time, Aaron and I and Brian, our other partner, we would kind of hit a triad like every week. You know, it was heavy workouts, jujitsu, shooting, and that was kind of our, you know, our focus. And then hitting a multidisciplinary class. Usually, it was with Craig. You know, but at some point, you know, you got family, you have work. I mean, both Aaron and I still have a day job, and so, my, frankly, you know, I just got my purple belt, and some of there's the reasoning behind that, but that's my focus right now is my jiu-jitsu. I'd like to have my black belt before. So Aaron and I are 49. So, man, I definitely would like to have my black belt before I'm 55. I think that's a reasonable goal, but hopefully sooner than that. So that's kind of where my focus is right now. So I've let some things taper back a little bit.
Yeah, I my recipe or formula is number one, you got to ID what you need, right, or what you think you need, or what you've learned you need. So a perfect example of that is ECQC. We look at people go to ECQC with Craig, and that is an audit of your current level of proficiency, and
Absolutely.
you realize real quickly, how am I on the ground? How am I at standing grappling? How am I in vertical and horizontal grappling? How am I as far as my verbal diffusion and de-escalation skills and managing unknown context? That's a solo operator tactic. You know, how good am I at dealing verbally with a subject or an unknown contact? So ECQC kind of was very resounding with me in the sense of I had a lot of holes in my game. You know, like I could at that point I'd been doing years of striking. I'd been doing some, you know, weapon work as far as impact and edge weapons through Filipino martial arts. I'd been shooting a lot. I'd already had several hundred hours of shooting training under my belt. But the day that my first ECQC, I did not navigate that like I was good at any of that. And so that's what led me down this kind of rabbit hole of how do I arrange my training, like you mentioned, you know, how do I continue to train all these different disciplines that I feel I need to be proficient in? And you hit one of them. I mean, it's fitness. I mean, again, prioritization for me right now at my age is number one is fitness. I mean, I work out every single day if I can. So, I mean, I like the grappling and I like the jujitsu and I like the shooting, but, you know, I have ID'd certain things that I need to do daily, I need to do weekly, and I need to do monthly, and I need to do yearly. So the way I kind of define that for people is I look at it as micro, meso, and macro, you know, programming, kind of like a periodization of weight training that we have all probably read about at one time. And so once I've ID'd what I need, then I need to stage it. You know, like staging is a matter of, and again, this is a medical term, and staging a disease or some kind of issue that a person has. But I stage it by looking at what my current level of proficiency is, and how do we stage that? Do we just go to, you know, you guys train together, and you shoot a drill and go, man, I'm not that good at this, so I need to work this more. Maybe one-handed support hand shooting. I suck at that, right? So in my staging priority of things that I need to practice, maybe that should take higher precedence over my freestyle, you know, 3-yard double taps to the you know, thoracic cavity, you know, because I can do that all day. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And that's kind of where Aaron and I identified recently in our shooting that we lacked. It's not that we stunk at it, but we definitely needed to improve at 25 bulls. You know, focusing on the bull is something that Aaron and I took away from the last range master instructor class, that it made it really evident that that's something we needed to work on. And Aaron and I have been putting a lot of work in working the bulls recently. And another thing that I admitted this on the air with when we hosted Cecil in Tulsa, I made, like we all do, make mistakes within some of the Evos. I had really been focusing on jujitsu, and like I am now, but that class led me to, okay, now I got to make sure that I'm not spending too much time away from integrating the weapons into my training. And that's because in one of the scenarios, I had passed my opponent's guard. I'm just I call it a textbook pass, and my mind went to, okay, I'm gonna access my weapon. You know, it was the part of the Evo was getting into position to access my weapon. And my orthodox jiu-jitsu came in play, and I went neon belly, something I do a lot, and I'm drawing my weapon in neon belly without controlling the hands because I had done that so often in orthodox jiu-jitsu, and it caused me to have to fight for my gun. And what was really eye-opening to me is how many ECQCs I had and hadn't made a mistake like that since I could remember. But because I wasn't making sure that I was integrating the weapons into my jiu-jitsu at the same time, I made a mistake. And it was a pretty bad mistake. So that reminded me, okay, I can't go too long without, number one, doing an integrated class, which Aaron and I typically don't go longer than a year at most of being in an ECQC, or we've been training with Cliff Byerly as well and Cecil. So yeah, that made me learn a stinging lesson that I can't get too far from it.
Well, you know, I took a class with Cecil this year, just a couple of weeks ago, with John Hearn. And Hearn's Who Wins, Who Loses, and what's the rest of it? Who Wins, Who Loses, and Why is a fantastic one-day course. And John has a lot of the science and neuroscience behind training and practice and stuff like that. And one of the things, I mean, I'd heard some of this before coming from the medical field and studying different subject matter, but one of the real takeaways from that class, and this goes right to what you were saying, Eric, about, you know, your focus is just straight jujitsu and you're not integrating the weapons. Well, why did that happen like that? You've been through ECQC a bunch of times. You've done integrated training. Where did those lessons go? Like, why weren't you able to recall and put into use? Well, you know, we go through 3 stages when we learn something, and the first stage is a developmental stage, and that stage is an introduction. So to me, a question I think I asked you guys this: what's the difference between training and practice? And I mean, a lot of people, they'll go to a class somewhere and they'll go, I'm going to training. And, you know, that's cool. I mean, I don't have a problem with intermingling the terms, but for my personal use, there's a difference between the two. For me, training is where I go to receive knowledge and new skills from a certified teacher, instructor, or coach, whatever. You know, there's a difference between those 3 as well, but you know, who I'm looking for to receive a certain information dump or skill set. And when I practice is what I do to retain what I learned at the training. So when we go to a training class, like let's take shooting, and we go to a 2-day class, and maybe I shoot, I don't know, 800 rounds. But out of those 800 rounds, how many reps did you get at each specific skill set that you were learning? How many reps did you get strong hand only? How many reps did you get support hand only? How many reps did you get drawn from the holster? And for the developmental phase, for us just to get the motor pathways built, we need a minimum of 300 to 500 reps. So there needs to be, you know, like some pretty specific lessons taught and reps, you know, built into a good training, right? To maintain those skills so that they can be recalled, you got to practice at about 100% times 100%. So if I did 300 reps of draws from concealment when I went to the training class, I mean, on a pretty regular basis, I got to do at least 300 reps of practice in order to keep those motor pathways. And the science behind this is we have our short-term memory, we have our long-term memory, and our short-term memory is kind of where we first take everything in, and if we don't continue the practice or the maintenance stage, our short-term memory just sheds that information. So, how many times have you guys been to a class somewhere and the class was amazing, you loved it, but then you didn't have time to practice, because of work and family and everything like that. And 2 weeks later, you guys talk to each other and you go, "Hey, do you remember what we did at that? Did we?" And you both look at each other and go, "What the hell? I just went to this class and now I can't remember." That's because our short-term memory is starting to shed that information. And again, this is a great amount. This information, again, I'm giving credit to John. John does a way better job at explaining this. Get to that class if you can. Have him on your show. I think you've already had him on the show.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have him.
But it's very important that people understand that sequence of learning when you attend training. It's the developmental stage. Practice is your maintenance stage, and ultimately, I want to get to automation. Automation is where I don't have to think about that. That's that unconscious competence where I can recall information at will. What's the difference between a white belt and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Well, my definition, obviously there's some accumulation of technique, but to the black belt has seasoned those techniques hundreds and thousands of times to where those skills are myelinated compared to a white belt has to consciously think about those skills is my thought.
How about you, Aaron?
Well, being just almost a blue belt, I can affirm that there is a lot of brain power that I use in jiu-jitsu. And the fact is, and I can kind of answer where I am kind of when it comes to my priorities. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a bit behind. I guess I don't know if I should say behind, but my priorities as a musician, keeping my skills up as a musician and learning new music every week for gigs, etc. And then only making jiu-jitsu once a week or, hopefully 2 to 3 times a week. But I can tell you, I say all that to say my skills as a shooter, I'm a pretty good shooter. I'm a pretty good musician, and those are skills that are very difficult to hone. But jiu-jitsu is let me add in that I'm an accountant, right? A degree in accounting and a certified management accountant, all this stuff. That's just very difficult. But I still, maybe it's because I'm not as experienced, but I still think of jiu-jitsu as one of the most difficult endeavor I've taken on. And
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
It's just incredible, as someone that is looking from the outside, and again, a little bit of digression, like you mentioned earlier, how someone takes ECQC for the first time and they realize a lot of their holes. And of course, naturally, I realize that I need to get into jiu-jitsu. But you just look at it and think, what can be so difficult? You're using some techniques, you're grabbing some arms here, you're twisting somebody up here, and how could this be that big of a deal? And then when you get into it, it's like, this is complicated. This is really taking all my brain power, and by the end of the class, I am spent, right? And then and then I just want to say, compare me to my wife, who now is a 2-stripe blue belt, and she started after me. and I'm still waiting on. I mean, hopefully any week now I'll get my blue belt promotion. But that, and I take something from Paul Sharp that said jiu-jitsu is a superpower, and man,
Yeah.
it is, because how else would my smaller, weaker wife be able to dominate me with technique and jiu-jitsu? So, I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, I mean, you mentioned it yourself. Your prioritization, your music is very, very important to you. The level of importance we place on things determines uh, how much effort we're going to put into continuing those things. So to you, your music is a very high level of importance, and so that takes priority, or has taken priority over your jujitsu. To your wife, it sounds like jujitsu's a priority to her. That's her primary go-to,
it is
right?
her primary.
Um,
It is her primary focus
yeah,
beyond family and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's. I think is actually an interview you guys did with Mike, and Mike, maybe it was Micah, mentioned something about jujitsu being the only martial art that he hasn't gotten bored with. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah,
Yeah. I think it was Mike. Yeah, because
and
he does say that Mike says that he gets bored.
yeah,
He gets bored.
Mike is a super intelligent guy. He's real cerebral, and I mean, I that when he made that comment, that resounded with me, because he's right. Same thing for me. I mean, I mean, I love them all. I've studied a ton of different martial arts. I've loved them all. I'm a martial artist at heart. I mean, I love shooting. I love studying shooting. I love this whole thing. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has so many different games. It's so complex in so many ways that it's vast and it's endless for a lot of people. But circling back to the original question, what's the difference between the white belt and the black belt? In my opinion, I totally agree with Eric in the sense of, you use the word seasoned, I'll use the word intuition, in the sense of, once the guys that I know that are good black belts, like, they do movements, they know what you're going to do before you do them. And so they like, they're already 2-3, they can think steps ahead, attack, counter, recounter, while you're only thinking about your guard pass. And that's because they've developed the techniques and tactics that they utilize. They've maintained them through practice, and they've gotten to the point where they're pretty automated. And it doesn't have to be there's no way to be a black belt in every single technique of jujitsu, unless you're Gordon Ryan. But we can have our go-tos, our high probabilities, you know what I mean? And then once somebody gets to a certain, okay, I've got a couple, 3, 4 solid guard passes standing, solid guard passes from my knees, I've my submission, repertoire. Once I check certain boxes, okay, I've gotten to that point where I can earn a higher belt. But that's how I look at it. And I might be wrong, but it's applicable to this conversation, because jiu-jitsu is one of those things that you need to get some mat time in order to get, that maintenance phase, that development and maintenance phase is a long phase before you automate, some of these skill sets. And even then, like you were saying, Eric, if you get away from the mats for a month, or you get injured or whatever, and you come back, man, I was just getting really good at, passing, doing the knee slice pass, and now I can't barely do it, because your brain is not maintaining. You haven't been doing the maintenance on it. It's no different than your car.
Yeah, and Chris, that was I like to say, and not a patronizing statement, is that your answer came from a black belt's point of view, and I totally agree. I should have added some form of what you said around the intuition, the overlearned process that a black belt has went through, to where the techniques are second nature to them. And I can answer it this way. I'll
Well, I
use my.
like what you said about being seasoned, because you're absolutely right. I mean, that's a great word to use, just a different way to express it.
Yeah, I think that excuse me, a good example, and this is today. Um, I've been helping with our morning 0600 class, and we've had a lot of new people come to that class. So myself and actually I'll just say his first name, Justin, who is running the morning class. He came to me and he said, "Hey, I just feel like we've really got to really get back to the basics." And so we're doing Gracie fundamentals with a lot, with everybody in the class. And I've added in some clinch work and some other aspects of it the last few weeks, but it really came. And I was talking with my wife about this when her and I went to the store before I settled down to cooking dinner. And I realized something when two of the guys after class came to me and they said they just totally felt uncomfortable with dealing with escaping side control. So that's one example. Two is that one of our other students, she had not seen the scissor sweep before, which was a part of one of our sequences today. And she's newer, so I don't fault her for not knowing that. My point is today I thought, man, so it's been a while since I've seen this many examples in one day about how being a beginner versus somebody that has experience. And I'm like, I guess I always feel like it, okay, so yeah, I'm a new purple belt, which is not, I'm not a black belt, but I've been doing it long enough that I have decent capabilities and understanding and game. But the one thing that it made me realize is like, I guess I do know enough that I'm fairly comfortable with it and I take it for granted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I take for granted
Absolutely. Yeah.
what I do understand. And this is another thing Aaron and I talked about is I only started feeling this maybe in the last year or two is I'm sure, I'll ask you if you went through this too, Chris, is maybe around once you were close to blue, getting to blue, and then blue belt, I think was the area where I noticed it the most. Is I could watch a technique being taught and eventually I get it, and just with some repetition and maybe, hey, can you explain this piece to me? But now it's getting to where, because I've seen some form of that body movement, even though it may be slightly different, that's like, okay, I understand how, and you just go apply it. And there's some tweaks that your instructor may come. And does that kind of, do you feel that way as a black belt? I'm sure you do more so than I do. You see something that your mind is kind of familiar with, and you can more easily do it than somebody that is very conscious. Is that something that you've thought about or that you've pinpointed in your experience?
Yeah, yes and no. I think it's the individual and their backgrounds. You guys both have, before you got to jiu-jitsu, you had martial arts backgrounds, right?
Yep.
Because I've heard you guys did Muay Thai and different things. And
yeah, I like you. I had a black belt in Jeet Kune Do and Kali and whatnot, Muay Thai. Yep.
So for certain people, I think that especially if you have studied individual physical skills like martial arts, which are I need a partner to train with, but it's not a team sport, right? And so with things like that, I can usually see something once and pick it up and be able to do it. But then again, I unless I go into the maintenance phase with it and drill it a bunch, and automate it, it's going to be gone in a little while. But like to your point, I can look at most techniques, whether standing or on the ground or even shooting now, and I can pick it up fairly rapidly the first go around. But that's great and all for that moment. But what happens when I need it later, right? So. Yeah, I think as we get better with different skill sets, I'm sure Aaron can listen to a guitar riff and then come pretty close to it on his own without reading the music. Yeah, Aaron?
I can
Yeah.
attest to that.
Yeah. So that's, again, it's knowing physical movement. It's knowing, how people, do things. And whereas, and the point I'm trying to make here in a long-winded way is that if you take somebody that's come from conventional sports, someone that played baseball, or somebody that's never done any martial arts, they've played team sports, I don't see them picking things up unless they're just physically like advanced. You know what I mean? They're just not I don't want to use the word freak, but they're just, a physical phenom. Most people have a real hard time. And that's why they got to repeat it, over and over when they first learn the technique to even get the nuances correct, because they're just not used to that type of training. Right? They come from a different background. That'd be like, okay, if I gave Eric a violin, I'm sure he could play better music than I can, but I wouldn't know first thing what to do with the violin or the guitar. Did you see my point?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He could probably make it sound, like an instrument. I would kill it. I would, it wouldn't be good. So,
Well,
so anyway,
and as you guys were talking, because and just a little bit of my background when it comes to martial arts, Chris, Eric has, I mean, I don't know how many more hours and how many more years than me on martial arts. He pulled me reluctantly into Thai boxing and then taught me quite a bit, and then really egged me on after I got back into shooting carbine about 10 years ago or so, and then kept bugging me to go to ECQC. And, there was trepidation on my part. And then I went, and like a lot of people, being in the collective, it changes your freaking life. But
yeah.
I still,
it shows you who you are.
yeah, yeah. And now I'm hooked on it. But I wish that jujitsu and combatives came to me as easy. Being a musician, like you mentioned, music for the most part, it just comes out of me, right? I can't think about what I'm doing because it's actually too difficult, and things are going so fast. It has to be a feeling that your brain communicating through your ears to your fingers, and you're still using a lot of myelination. Like, I mean, when I just do this, you can tell I'm a guitar player because of the myelination of millions of notes, right? And then for shooting, Eric was talking about taking, some his jujitsu skills for granted. I had some fun this weekend. I was with a couple of friends that don't shoot a ton, and had the opportunities to coach them a bit. And when I get to do that, so I take for granted my skills as a shooter, even though I'm not the best shooter you're going to run into, but I'm pretty good at it. And it's weird to be able to instantly, literally see someone holding a gun and know instantly about three things you can help them with.
Yeah.
I look forward to the time when I feel that comfortable with jujitsu. But just full circle, what I'm saying is martial arts are a new phenomenon, or a new study for me, but it's become my life now. The good thing
Yeah.
about guitar is I still practice about 1 to 2 hours a day, but it's still, I would say, shooting and this podcast. Let me just put it that way: shooting and this podcast are the most important things to me. Then guitar, then jujitsu. So one of these days, hopefully, I can bump that jujitsu up. But one thing that occurred to me when we're talking about multidisciplinary, Eric brought it up, and you mentioned it too, Chris, about fitness, strength training. I mean, would you guys agree that strength training is part of multidisciplinary? What what would you? To me, now I'm seeing that. We had an awesome guest, Nick Eric. I'm going to butcher his last name, Delgadillo. Nick,
Delgadillo.
Yeah.
just
From
starting strength.
Ripeto's training,
Yep.
starting strength. Yep. Yep.
Well, and Eric had told me some of the same things multiple times, but Nick articulated in such a way that it was literally the same type of epiphany that I had in ECQC about jujitsu. I finally got the epiphany that I needed to get serious and make strength training a part of my life for the rest of my life. I'm still getting into that, but you know, as I was thinking, so you guys agree? Would you fold that into your thoughts of all the aspects of multidisciplinary
Well,
studies?
I have my thoughts on it, but I'm going to let Chris go first.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean that to me, I've gone through a bunch of fitness phases, probably like everybody, in my lifetime, and from powerlifting and big weights to a little bit of bodybuilding, and then when I got into jujitsu, I was when I first started jujitsu, not when I first started jujitsu, when I really got serious about jujitsu, and when I first met Craig, I was about 280 pounds. And, I could squat, a bunch of weight and, all the main movements. I was super strong and I was big and wasn't necessarily fat. But all that bulk slowed me down. It slowed me down on my feet. It slowed me down on the ground, especially like I was a turtle on the ground. And so I think we can go too far in one direction. I mean, some people will go, "Oh my God, did he just say you can be too strong?" No, I said you can go too far in one direction with certain things. For me, it was the bulk, right? Now I kind of adhere to Larry's, Lindemann's prescription, and I've changed over from. I mean, I'm still very strength focused of maintaining at least body weight on bench press, and then 2 times body weight squat and deadlift. So I have benchmarks I try to hit. Once a month I'll do like a heavy day, like a black box day from CrossFit. But the majority of my training, my strength training, is with kettlebells, and that's because of jujitsu. And I realized a couple years ago, I mean, I was training a lot, but my cardio after I had COVID, I had a really, really hard time getting my cardio back. I was okay up to that point, and then in October of 2020, I got COVID real bad. I almost ended up in the hospital. And that took me probably 9 or 10 months to get back to where I could roll again and not just be devastated, like just hurting. And that really made me realize I need to be strong. I don't necessarily need to be big. I need to be strong, and I need my cardio's got to be there. So like I'm, along the lines of what you're talking about, Aaron, my fitness regimen is kettlebells, and zone 2 work, cardio work. And I hit that. That's one of those things that it's daily. Like I'm on the bike doing zone 2 or running doing zone 2 on a day that I have jujitsu, or on days off from jujitsu, I've got an hour and a half workout where I'm doing kettlebells for 50 minutes, mobility, and then zone 2. And again, just using the kettlebells. And I'm probably the heaviest kettlebell I use is a 106 pounder for swings and stuff, and some two-handed cleans. I can still deadlift, a little over 400 pounds. I can still squat pretty heavy. I've got some shoulder problems, so benching I've just done away with. I don't even bench anymore. But to your point, I think it's supremely important to be strong. You guys tell me, when you go against the guy on the mat or standing up in the clinch, and you feel that raw strength of that individual, and you go versus the person you just went with who isn't necessarily that strong, like it. I've clinched up with guys, and I mean, I'm not a small guy, but I've clinched up with guys and been like, oh shit, this is not good, so it matters. It definitely matters. I always tell people that train with me, fortune favors the bigger, badder, meaner, stronger, animal. And that's what I want to be, so.
Well,
Well,
I wanted to
and my go ahead, Aaron.
shut up, Eric.
Next time you're gonna get it again.
So I did just want to point some, or actually even ask you guys this question, because you were mentioning bulk, especially from a muscular standpoint. Muscle requires more energy too, so that can slow you down from a gas standpoint, can it not?
Absolutely. Yeah. Big energy pull there with the more muscle you've got. I mean, we don't see a lot of, there are some hybrid athletes. You look at Alex Viada, for example. I'm a big fan of Complete Human Performance and Alex Viada. I don't know if you guys follow him, but he's a monster, and that dude deadlifts 600 pounds and runs ultra marathons. But he's really the exception to the rule. Most of the people that I've met that are that size, they're big and strong for a very short, limited amount of time, and then they gas. So I want to be, strong, and, I'm not losing any size, but I want to be strong, but I want to be able to go for a 10, 20-minute round if I had to, and when we roll, we do, anywhere from 4 to 6-minute rounds, 5-minute rounds, 6-minute rounds. And, with jujitsu, but we also spar standing. We do clinch work rounds. By the time we do an hour and a half class, we've gotten in 10 or 12 5-minute rounds at a pretty good heart rate. So,
well, and for clarity, so when you say zone 2, you're talking about in your aerobic energy system, correct?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the 120 to 140s or so.
You got it. For me specifically, I'm hunting for 125 to 130. I don't want to get much higher than 130. That gets into that causes a little bit of stress. Another reason, guys, that I went to this method. Larry's been telling me to do it for years, but what does Larry know? But now I've listened to Larry and done a lot of research on it, and I was getting hurt a lot. And I was getting hurt a lot in jiu-jitsu. And that's when I was using the barbell. And again, don't mistake me. I'm not saying don't use the barbell, just as me, right? But my wife's a level 2 CrossFit coach. I was doing CrossFit for years, and I was getting hurt in jiu-jitsu, and I was getting hurt doing other things. And come to find out, if I added up all the stuff that I was doing, like Aaron said, the energy drain on me was so high that when I was doing something highly combative like jujitsu and trying not to get arm barred and, trying not to get key locked and stuff like that, I was pulling muscles and damaging shoulders and damaging limbs because I didn't have the capacity, I was shot all the time. And so the zone 2 at that lower 120 to 140, it's not low impact. I can sit on the bike for an hour, no problem. And I get off the bike and I still have a tank to where I could go and wrestle if I needed to. But what did I just do for my heart and for the rest of my system? A lot of good, right? So the key there for me now at my age is getting a good amount of volume in that's low impact, because I want to not be hurt when the time comes if I have to protect myself. But specifically, like with my practice, my jiu-jitsu practice and training, is that when I want to go hard with somebody, I want to be able to go hard and not worry about it, right? But if I'm beat up all the time, which you see a lot of people are, I don't know how many guys you've probably been through it, but a lot of guys I run into in the gyms, and that was me. That was me for a long time. Just in the last year have I been able to improve that. But we always meet the guy or girl they're constantly beat up. Well, we need to take a look at how they're practicing and training. So,
well, and Chris, I'm going to tell on myself. I've had a lot of injuries over the years, and it wasn't until and probably not to a similar degree, because I still, even a few weeks ago, and it was rolling hard. I got up off the mats and had about a 24-hour spasm in my back, and at first I was like, man, here we go again. But I think that was part of my problem back then when I kept getting really injured bad, is that that I was doing too much heavy lifting volume, and then I do anaerobic work, and then I would do jujitsu, and so right now I am in fact back to building my barbell lifts up again, but it's hard for me, and Nick, if he's listening, it's hard for me to completely shelve my zone 2 work, because it's still something that, like I would say, even what was it, about 2 weeks ago it was about 3 weeks ago that I really started, okay, I'm back on my strength program again. And I dropped my zone 2 cardio. And then I noticed it's like, I'm not getting as many workouts in. And, I noticed that, like you mentioned, you can recover fairly fast from that form of cardio. And you're still putting work in, and you're keeping your resting heart rate down and giving yourself that base. And so, man, it's I'm figuring out how I can continue to gain back in my barbell movements and still make sure I'm fitting that in. I just don't see myself. I don't see myself like you at some point. When I was younger, I was doing plenty over 400 on the two primary lifts and over 300 on my bench. I'm not worried about making it there again, but I definitely want to get back to where I, was in the high 300s on everything. And it's going to take me a minute to get there.
Well, and if you think about what we're talking about with just fitness, I mean, fitness is multidisciplinary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, you've got strength training, you have anaerobic, you have aerobic, and other thing. You have mobility. I mean, that's one thing that a lot of people these kids nowadays, they have technology, they have instruction that I never had when I was a kid. My son is now 23, and like I watch him warm up before a workout, and I look at him and go, "Where did you learn all this mobility and everything?" And I mean, if I'd known that when I was 23, I might not have had the injuries that I've experienced, but we didn't do mobility back in the day. It was, you go in the gym and you lift, you go in the gym and you run, you go in the gym and do your cardio, right? And that was it. And so this is applicable to our overall conversation, is that we look at fitness and kind of, how do we skin the cat the most appropriate way for the context that we live in? And what are your goals? Again, it goes to prioritization. Is your goal to be able to roll for 6, 7, 10 rounds in jiu-jitsu, or is your goal to be able to run a marathon? Is your goal to be able to, do 3 Muay Thai rounds, like the crew test, where you got to do 60 kicks in the first minute or whatever it is, So it all depends on,
Memories.
prioritization. And for me, my point to all this is, right now my prioritization has changed, and that zone 2 has helped me to recover from the others. Like, what a lot of people don't realize is that base, that aerobic zone 2 base, is imperative to your ability to recover from the anaerobic work and from the strength work. We've probably all met the guy or girl that can do 100 burpees in a row, and they're an anaerobic monster, but they're also an aerobic monster, because that aerobic base is what helps them recover faster, right? And so that's something I've been doing a lot of research on and trying to plug into my fitness, aspect.
And support
guys,
your whole program. Go ahead, Aaron.
I just want to digress real quick, and we don't need to dive into this too much, but I often think about this, and I was actually talking to someone about it today. I believe that when it comes to jiu-jitsu rolling, it's interesting. I don't think I've even talked or about this with Eric much, but Chris, what are your thoughts on when you roll? Two questions. What percentage of effort, skill, etc., do you think is optimal for normal training? And are you that concerned with making sure that you stop your opponent from getting any submission on you, or what are your thoughts on that percentage and how you interact and allow your opponent to work too?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question right there. That's a good one. So I have opinions on this that some friends of mine and people that I train with don't share the same opinion, but my opinion is based upon my experiences. And I came up through jiu-jitsu at a couple main gyms that I trained at, and we always rolled. Every time you roll, the way I say it, it's the kumite. You know what I mean? Like you're at the competition, and I what did that do for me? That did that make me relatively tough? I guess I don't know. That ask my training partners whether I'm tough. I can't really answer that, right? But um, that got me hurt a bunch. That made it slower for me to automate the skills because I was so busy trying to react all the time. The speed with which we were rolling, and I didn't have the maintenance or the automation in the skills yet, that I was playing catch up and I couldn't process quick enough to defend or attack at the right time or whatever. And again, I'm just because I'm a black belt doesn't mean I know anything about jujitsu, right? But for me, I know that I feel that training like that a lot slowed me down more than it helped me speed up as far as my progress in jiu-jitsu. So I'm going to answer your question now. With my group, I do a 6 a.m. class a couple times a week with some friends of mine here at PFC. We have our own Combatives room here. And so this is I share this. I use PFC's Combatives room along with Chad Lyman. Chad Lyman is who I got my black belt from, and he runs our C4C police jiu-jitsu program. And Chad was just here yesterday, trained with us yesterday morning. He comes in when he can, but we start off our rolls with kind of like a fluid roll, and it's a warm-up roll almost. Like, I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard the phrase flow rolling or whatever. And usually our first round, we do a whole bunch of other warm-ups. This kind of goes along with the conversation, but when it comes to multidisciplinary training, I have had to figure out how to batch my training in ways that I can hit all these different disciplines each week or month or whatever. So our warm-ups are not line drills or shrimping or anything like that. Our warm-ups are clinch work. Our warm-ups are stand-up striking. Our warm-ups are stand-up counter weapon work. Like, we do 5-minute round warm-ups. I demonstrate it. We drill it for 5 minutes of each different thing. And so we're pretty warmed up. And then we go into a jiu-jitsu technique that we teach, one of us teaches, or counter striking is what we did this week, jits with hits. And then we do like a fluid roll. And then sometimes we use a method that we call move for move. And move for move is where, let's say one of you and I are rolling, and it's very slowed down pace. And this comes from a guy here in Vegas. I got it from one of his students, but it comes from Rich Castro. And basically what it is, it's like a chess match. I have to tell you what I'm going to do. So I'm in your open guard. Okay, I'm going to post on your hip. I'm going to grab your left knee, and I'm going to knee slice across. And then you have to tell me. And if I don't do that move within like 3 seconds, and I sit there and have to think about it, my opponent gets to move. And what does this force both players to do? Explain what they're doing. So, nice. And I'm going to be, very frank here. I got to a stage in jiu-jitsu where I was doing things intuitively or automated. I was defending certain things, but man, if you ask me afterwards, like how I did it or what I do, my mind was blank. And that's not good to me. I want to be able to explain everything that I do and why I do it. So anyway, we would do move for move a little bit sometimes, but the majority of our rolls are probably, I would say, 80% intensity. and 50 to 80% intensity. And for me, at least the people that I roll with, there's always people that want to go harder, and that's cool. And I'll go hard if you want to go hard. But I look at predatory animals and how do predatory felines and bears and predatory mammals train their young? Do they bite each other and cause blood and hurt each other and break limbs, or do they play?
They play.
They play. And so, play jujitsu. I would much rather be able to roll with you guys for an hour straight at a 50 to 80% rate and get all of that skill development for an hour versus going balls to the wall, who's going to beat who for 15 minutes, 5-minute rounds. Because over the course of a year, I'm going to have way more hours of training than you are. And I'm not going to be beat up and I'm not going to be hurt. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And Aaron, if I can interject there, because you said something I think is super important and something like when we're starting a rolling session in the morning class, Justin and I have been trying to say, okay, 40 to 60%. That's what we've been trying to use because really people are really needing to dial it back. But I try to emphasize, and Justin tries to emphasize that you're not competing against each other. And to what you said that I really keyed in on is you did a lot more jiu-jitsu during that year than that other person or those people did that were just trying to run just 100%. Because what did that do? Yeah, if they turtled up and T-Rexed up, they probably kept their training partner from getting a half or if sometimes any of the techniques. But what did they do? They went into a survival mode that they didn't gain a better position, or maybe they barely gained a better position. They likely didn't get a submission themselves. And all they really did the whole time was keep their training partner, I emphasize that, keep their training partner from learning, and they in turn didn't learn either. And I think I think that's important what you said. I think that's a good way to think about it.
I'm sure both you guys have heard not getting tapped out isn't a representation of how well you did.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like I want you to tap me in a round and I mean, I want to be able to tap you, but that's not the emphasis for me of the round. It's getting to that position. It's controlling your position, controlling you. I mean, it kind of goes back to ECQC. If I can, get dominant position and do certain things to you and not allow you to do certain things to me, I'm going to win that encounter. Right. Another analogy that I think is resounding with some people when I give it to them is, do you max out every time you lift? Every day that you train with weights, do you max out? Probably
Heck
not.
No.
Probably not. And what happens if you try that? If you try that, you're going to get hurt. But again, there's a difference between competition and there's a difference between practice and there's a difference between training. Jiu-jitsu combines training and practice. Most classes, you go, you do some warm-ups, and then there's a demonstrated techniques. You drill it a little bit, and then you practice a little bit, and then your rolling is practicing all the various skills that you've learned up until that point. At least that's how I look at it. Competition is the day you're going to test that. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen, I use this hashtag, study, train, practice, test. Shooting an IDPA, that's a test, man. That's not a practice session. That's not training. That's you going and testing yourself out. Me going to Naga or going to the Worlds or whatever and doing jiu-jitsu, that's test day, right? But when I'm in the dojo, when I'm in the training area with my friends, with the people that I want to roll with, it's practice. I'm there to make you better primarily because I want to be a good training partner, and I hope you're there to make me better. And if we have that attitude, then it's limitless how fast people can progress. in my experience. Because just in a perfect example, this is myself. I can only use me as representation, but I mean, I can point to some other people that I train with. But just in the last 2 years, where I've really dialed things back and started this kind of perspective on training jiu-jitsu, my skills, I feel, have leapfrogged, because I'm training at a rate that I can train for a long time. I'm getting a lot more reps in. I'm more consistent because I'm not hurt. Again, I'm sure there's people that will argue and say, no, you guys got to go like it's a real fight every time you roll. And that's cool. That's just a different opinion. I don't necessarily think that's necessary. Again, we go to that 80% of the time is at that lower threshold, and then 20% of the time we'll hit it. Like yesterday I went to row with Chad. Neither of us held back. We were going at it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you do that 1 or 2 rolls in the session, but the rest of them, work. I rolled with my son yesterday, and he just got his blue belt. And you talked
I saw that.
Yeah, somebody asked about, or one of you guys asked about, like what pace Aaron asked about what pace you roll at. At my level now, I can regulate the pace that I roll at with most people, unless they're like a black belt or a good brown belt or competitive purple belt. Like, I can usually dictate the pace that things are going to go. And so my role with him was about him. My role with him was to see, okay, what's he doing with how's his hand fighting? What's he doing, to try to pass my guard? What's he do when he gets past my guard? And so, I mean, I'm letting him do certain things. I'm letting him play his game so that, like the lion cubs playing together, he realizes the different things that he's capable of. But if I just resist him and say, you're not going to beat me, and make it into a competition, he might learn to be competitive, which is a good skill, right? But he's not going to learn a lot of jiu-jitsu that day.
No, and if I can kind of emphasize more about what you're saying about the play, and this isn't that I'm trying to beat up on individuals that just can't seem to get past. I'm just going to put it like it is. Can't get past their own ego when they're rolling. That's just an unfortunate side of jiu-jitsu, and I'll say it specifically in the U.S. and this is only because I've spoke with several Brazilian friends over the years, and then I heard more of this recently. Is that's one of the reasons why? And now we can't say that Brazilians aren't badasses on the mats. Of course they are. But my understanding is that in the early years, a lot of the Brazilians didn't care much for the arrogant U.S. Participants over there in Brazil, because they just couldn't understand that and not everything was rolling 100%. And I don't know if that's part of what we continue to deal with is, I just don't think that gyms. I mean, I hear my instructor currently say it before rolls, and I hear a lot of people that I respect is like, hey, we're not competing. Keep it that 40 to 60%, and we'll all be cool. But it's it tends to be the higher belts that tend to listen to that. And I'm not saying there aren't higher belts that just can't get past rolling hard, but I do wish that there could be a renaissance, I'll just use that word, within the jiu-jitsu community, that is a well understood principle, that, man, people would just learn a lot faster, and we would have a lot more people sticking around too, in my opinion.
Well, to me, it goes back to like, I spend whenever anybody new comes to train with us, I give them a little kind of in brief, and that is giving them definitions. And those definitions go back to, okay, this is what competition is. This is what training is. This is what practice is. And if somebody knows right from the get-go what not from the get-go, but from the get-go, what the differences are, then they might act a little bit differently, right? I can't blame a brand new white belt for going, kind of crazy, because they don't have any experience yet. So there's nothing, we can counsel them and say, hey man, let's just relax and you try to do the move we worked on today. But they're going to go at their pace because they don't have a point of reference to start from. But once you get to blue and purple and brown, like you have a point of reference. You've been there long enough that you should understand what a competitive pace is and what a kind of a learning. I like just calling it a learning pace. If I can roll with you guys at a pace to where I can process what you're doing and what I'm doing and not be so trying to, initiative and lack of initiative, right? We look at, again, ECQC. If I can see what your move you're going to start to do, then I can start to process and create a roadmap in my head for where I want to turn to escape from you, right? And I like that map analogy in the sense of like I got this beautiful map in front of me, and there's a point A and there's a point B, and the white belt might see all these different turns to get there, like a maze. The black belt knows the fastest route from point A to point B. And that just comes from being able to process the information while we're rolling. If we don't give ourselves time to actually, see and feel and ingrain what's going on during that physical interaction, it's, what are we doing? We're just kind of, who's tougher, who's trying to taps who out.
Yeah. Well, real quick, Chris, as this has been an awesome subject, I want to make sure that real quick we give a really good definition, because you presented the question pre-show about why is multidisciplinary training important, and so I'll just premise it this way. You posted a real good video about an entangled fight, multiple opponents, and I think is one of the best examples recently of why we should train multidisciplinary methodologies. And I'll let you comment on the video as well. But I mean, to me, just to give the audience members, and I'll somehow try to link it within or a form of that video so folks can see it in the show notes, is you got a person there, they go to the ground, and you got one individual that clearly is the bad guy to two other people, or the three other people, I should say, pardon me. And he is so focused on winning a grappling match on the ground that he's completely ignoring a person that's kicking him in his side from one direction. And then the other guy on the other side decides to pull a knife and start stabbing him. and I think, man, that to me, and I think that's what you were presenting in that is that is the pinnacle of why we should be training in multidisciplinary. Can you comment on that and your specific thoughts on that video?
Yeah, I mean, I posted just kind of a few things on that video. I didn't go into a lot of debrief like I usually do. I didn't have time, but you hit it on the head. 3v1. We got three people against one individual. The individual that's, I guess, the victim or defender in that situation is focused on grappling. I mean, he's there on the ground with another person. He's actually, he or she. I mean, the more I watch the video, I wonder. It's hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman. It is hard to tell. And but they're on top, so they're in a dominant position. If you watch the video clearly, the person on the bottom is trying to gouge their eyes, and then, as you said, Eric, they have one person's kicking him in the side and then trying to kick him in the head, and then the third individual pulls. Literally, I slowed the video down so you could see them pull this folding knife out of their pocket of their coat, open it up, and stab the person that's on top on the ground 3 times. And then a crowd comes around and the two standing individuals run away. But to summarize, we look at what Craig calls his criminal assault paradigm, or paradigm of criminal assault. And that is a lot of um, self-defense, personal protection situations for civilians and even law enforcement officers nowadays happen at close range. There's multiple aggressors or attackers involved. There's weapons involved. Either now we could look at the police officer has a weapon on me, or I'm a concealed carrier and I have weapons on me, but usually the bad guys have weapons too. And so if you look at that paradigm, that model for criminal assault, what do I need to be prepared for that? And that was kind of my question that I posed to my followers on Instagram at the end of that post was, what are the different things you need to practice, train, and practice to be prepared for that? And one individual commented and said, "Well, if this guy just had a gun, well, yeah, I mean, we all know, and a lot of people don't realize it until they do it. If you're that close to somebody, to three individuals, and you got a gun, I mean, I hope you can navigate it successfully, but you're going to have a very hard time. If it was me attacking you or a couple of young fighting age males that don't want to get shot, you're going to have a very hard time getting that gun out and into play if you're that close to us. So just having a tool doesn't mean it's going to be effective. So there's other disciplines that we need to fall back upon to help us and navigate a situation like that. You look at vertical grappling, you look at standing striking, for example. If they had stayed on their feet and that individual had used some striking skills to create some distance, maybe then they could have got to their gun. But my point is, if all you got is a gun and that's the only discipline you've ever studied, and you run into a situation like that, which are fairly common despite what some people will tell you, then you've got a problem. And there's people that protect themselves with a gun every single day in America, and God bless them. I think that's great. I'm all for it. But I don't think we hear about the situations where people are victimized by situations like what that video demonstrates. The news, we don't see those quite as often. That's why I post a lot of those, and others, the guys from the collective, and I know Cecil posts some sometimes. And we try to show people, like, it's great that you're good at this or that. What happens when you run into this? What's going to be your answer for that? Is hope your strategy? Hope is not a great strategy. So,
yeah, I think that's a superb way of describing both the video and the need for what was our ultimate subject, was multidisciplinary training, and I think that is the point. Is like the one I saw that to the I almost commented, but I just let it be. Is the folks that, oh, I've just got a gun. Why do I need grappling? Why do I need martial arts? Why do I need fitness? I'm overblowing that, but it's like, we've all seen, want to beat them up. We see the out of shape gun guy that they see that talisman as they're out for any situation. They really see it that way, because it's really that their mind has not faced what are the possibilities, and they actually have, lack of a better term, a fantasy that any self-defense situation that they can solve that problem with that tool. And we just, through this laboratory that, let's just say that Craig and that you guys have also helped develop, man, we learned otherwise. And we also learned, go ahead.
No, William said it best in his classes. Some people just don't have a parking space in their head for it.
Yeah.
And, I think this probably isn't, I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I always say the best students are previous victims. And that's because they know, they've experienced it. I mean, that was me. I experienced some violence, and I never want that to happen again to me or anybody that I'm with. And so that has guided my path all these different years. And, I hope I go the rest of my life and never, experience anything again, because I enjoy doing this stuff now and I have fun. I meet cool people like you guys and others we've talked about, and I love it, so, but But if the time comes, I want to be prepared. I don't ever want that to happen to me again. Somebody who's never been victimized like that, it's hard for them to uh, form a reason why they need to do all this stuff that we've been talking about. And only the most dedicated people who study and really, if you think about ECQC, when you go to that class, and a lot of people, there's very few people that navigate that class successfully. You're essentially getting beaten. You're getting, you're being victimized, and you realize what it's like, and you go, I don't like this. I'm going to do something about this, right? And most of the people that come to ECQC, they take measures to fix that problem, right? But if all you do is go to the range and shoot at a target every now and then, or do a bunch of gun classes, which again, no problem if that's your thing, I'm totally cool with it. But don't tell me you're prepared, because I don't think you're well rounded.
Well, I don't. I want to make sure Aaron gets a comment in. I feel bad. I think I've dominated most of the conversation, Aaron. I'm sorry.
You're fine, bro.
It is that I mean, you hit it on the head, and I'm just going to use Craig's phrase. It's hard to use a better phrase. Is that nobody wears a cape when it comes to ECQC, and actually, more to the point, I think that both of you would agree. Number one, no matter how experienced, no matter what the discipline they come from, if they're a black belt in jiu-jitsu or a Div 1 wrestler, or they're just a badass shooter, have some capabilities in empty hands, no one of those individuals goes in and dominates ECQC. And why? Because number one, Craig is brilliant at pairing individuals throughout the course to make sure that it is the honest experience that it's supposed to be. And number two is that your opponent has a vote and Murphy has a vote in it. There's going to be accidents. You're going to slip and fall. I mean, not everything goes out perfectly, and no matter what the skill that you developed, sometimes luck isn't on your side.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest factor of all this, is that to that point, is that nobody dominates in ECQC, but that's a facsimile of what takes place in the worst problem, which is the entangled fight, right? Would you agree, Chris, that that's probably the worst case scenario, is that we're in an entangled fight that includes weapons?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at Tom Given's statistics, he does a great job in his book, and then in his classes. Tom talks about his students and their incidences they've experienced, and he's got great information there. But again, I don't want to go on the fact that, well, that's how 85% of gunfights are, so I'm good to go. Well,
What if
when you run into that 15%, you're not good to go. So what's your life worth? What's the importance level you have placed on being prepared? Or what if you're with your wife and your kids? It might not just be you. That's the thing. Is we look at second and third party protection tactics, and me being able to protect my son and my wife while they're with me, that changes the whole dynamic. And that's a whole other discussion. But to me, specialization fails when it comes to the ambiguity that is the real world, right? If I'm just that super awesome shooter, that's great. I admire the heck out of all of those guys and girls that do that. But me personally, I don't want to be perfect at any one. I do want to be perfect. I don't have the time to be perfect and dedicate to just one subject. I want to be proficient at all of these various disciplines, so that I'm well-rounded enough to when, if I can deal with the gunfight at 15 yards, I'm good to go. I can deal with the gunfight at 0 yards, and I'm good to go, and everything in between. and that's what I'm looking for. It's, I mean, my black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is great and all, but it's not who I am. Like, I mean, I know some people, they get that, and that's like a big deal. And don't get me wrong, it's a super big deal to me. I've been doing Jiu-Jitsu for, it took me 25 plus years to get my black belt, right? But
Sounds like that's going to be my time frame too.
yeah, but I also shoot, and I can hang, on the range. I can hang standing up, and you give me a knife or some type of impact tool, I can do okay. So I mean, I'm more proud of being multidisciplinary, and being able to navigate all these different arenas if I have to. So that's, I don't know if that answered that question, but
Well, I'll say
I think
this. That's
superbly. Go ahead, Aaron.
I think that's kind of a mic drop right there, because that summed it up and brought it full circle. Because I know for shooting, to be frank, is my favorite thing, but I have too many other things to focus on to be a grand master, or a distinguished master in IDPA. But I think so. We've gone fairly long, and this is about the time frame that we like to spend with people, actually, Chris. But I think we're going to have a second show, and because I think one of the main issues, and it's something that I have to deal with right now, is having a training group for this multidisciplinary lifestyle. Let's just put that's what it is. It's a
yeah,
lifestyle if you seek it out. And you, here I am, an accountant and a guitar player, and I put more time in this and it's more important to me than most people. But and then take you and then Eric, who have obviously had training groups. It's very hard to. So I've had to get over the hurdle for me to study these things, and for me to take multiple ECQCs and several other from Cliff Byerly and Cecil Birch, etc. Multiples, but that's a hurdle for me. What about the hurdle that's here that gets other people to get involved and get some blue guns and do some jujitsu and some knock knives? That's another subject, right? Is getting that training group together, especially in my area. I probably Mike Brown and a few other people that have way too much stuff going on in their world are the only people I can think of in this town that I could pull together right now. But
well,
I do have some other people I'm interested, though.
yeah, and you guys got a great resource here with your podcast. I mean, I bet if you guys put the word out or to some of your previous students, and I mean, I didn't mention this in when I did my whatever bio or resume at the beginning, but I mean, I think I was the first. We could ask Craig, but I think I was the first Shivworks training group in New
Yep.
York. And
I think so,
if I
buddy.
wasn't, I was one of them. And I mean, I remember answering questions to guys about getting insurance and setting the group up and everything like that back on TPI. But that was real difficult at first because of exactly what you said, Aaron. I mean, I had to convince people who hadn't been to ECQC, who'd never been a victim. They were really good at what they did. I was fortunate enough to be good friends with a high level Taekwondo black belt who ran a prominent school in my area, and he let us use his Taekwondo school. And he was open minded enough to come in and train with us. Like he was
Awesome.
part of the group, and that dude was a badass. Like anytime anybody always shit talks Taekwondo to me, I always say to them, anybody, it's not the art, it's the person, right? And that just happens
absolutely.
to be the mechanism with which he's delivering violence, right? And so he was, and Pat still is a good friend of mine, and I can never repay him allowing us to run that training group at his dojo, no cost. And over the years, I think we ran it for about 7 years. I think the most we had is like 10 guys and girls come. But I mean, most of the time it was 3, 4, 5 people. But, I mean, what more do you need? You got some people to roll around with and grapple with and do stuff with. And again, I'm in this for me. I hate to say that, but like if I got one person to train with, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do some work.
Well, Chris, if I could really accentuate what you just said. So two things. Number one, I forgot about this piece. So I ran a training group in Washington State, south of Seattle, for about 3.5 years. And incidentally, your post about running a training group is what helped formulate what I did. And so it's like I had forgotten totally about that post, that how much that affects other people, Chris. And number three is I went through the same number of people. I would have 10 people every now and then. The majority of the time it was 5 to 3, sometimes
Yeah.
1, for the whole 3.5 years. But I will tell you this, I bet yours was as well. It was fairly storied within our gym. They're like, hey, you want to learn how to deal with weapons? You got to get to the CQS training group.
It's here it's we do invitation only. Our At PFC here, the gym that we've got, the Combatives room that we've got, is for, because we work with a lot of our lion's share of the training that we do at PFC is the U.S. military, and so we have a lot of SOCOM, AFSOC guys coming through here, and units come here. They use our CrossFit gym in the morning. They go to our range and train with us, and then they come in and they do whatever. But so if you're military or law enforcement in the security field here in Vegas, we allow you to come in and train for free. As long as I know you and we've met you and I, we can vouch for you somehow, right? And the dudes that come, we started off just doing a little bit of jiu-jitsu, and then since I've morphed it into doing more of this stuff, kind of like my old training group, essentially, the feedback I get from guys, hey, today we did striking on the ground. We never did that in jiu-jitsu. All we ever do is sport jiu-jitsu, like that. I never knew what to do, and we do counter knife work, counter knife attack. We do some retention, work, and all of that to say, like, people love it. Like they, at least here, these guys, and we have a pretty high level room. The majority of people, we probably have 2 white belts, 3 white belts. Everybody else, we are mostly brown, black, and purple belts.
Ooh, and that's a group, man.
Yeah. So it's a fun group, and again, I'm basically running it like I did before. And to kind of go full circle to multidisciplinary training, that's kind of like what I said at the beginning, is that once a week we try to hit, because maybe some of your listeners are going, okay, well, I get what it is, but how do I practice it? Like, how do I make it, like for Aaron, how do I fit it in with everything else, with the guitar and kids and job, and being a CPA is not an easy job, right? So I try to hit, fitness every day if I can. I miss a day here or there. That happens, right? I try to hit jiu-jitsu a minimum of twice a week. I try to do striking a minimum of twice a week as part of my warm-ups for jiu-jitsu. So it's not a separate class, but it's part of my warm-up. So I'm batching tasks, right? During fitness or right after fitness, I'm doing dry fire or I'm doing medical prep. So I've got a yoga block that I can practice wound packing. I've got tourniquet in my garage. I just did that this morning. I get done with a set of whatever, and then I got to get a tourniquet on a limb within 13 seconds. So I got my medical component I'm hitting. I've got, during our group, we do some managing unknown contacts every now and then. So I'm checking these boxes, and then, like once a month, I try to, and this sounds bad, once a month, but I mean, I really only do live fire when I'm teaching a class. Everything else is dry fire. I probably 90% of my practice is dry fire, and I do okay when I shoot. So once a month, maybe twice a month, I'll get out there, because I don't get out on the range and teach as much anymore now that I'm in an executive position here with PFC. But when I get out and teach, I do live fire, and then I'll do a little practice session on my own. I do live fire, and then once a month we try to work some knife work in, because that's not as high on my priority scale anymore. And then yearly, I look at my training calendar in the sense of what classes do I want to take from other people. So this year I got Hearn's class. I'm going to do the Glock Red Dot instructor course coming up in November. I got Jedi's Red Dot instructor course in December. And then we got ECQC. So I'm going to log almost 60 hours of training this year with other people, you know?
Man, I tell you what I'm going to do with your permission is we're new to YouTube. I mean, our listenership on audio blows away anything we have on YouTube, but it's growing. But if you don't mind, I'm going to split that out and put it in a single YouTube video because I think you just formulated very just expertly enumerated a good way that people can fit it all in. And I think that's great, Chris. And yeah, that's good stuff, buddy. So if you don't have any problems with that, I'd like to do that.
I don't think of your training in that micro, meso, and macro, frame. Daily. What are you doing daily? What are you doing weekly? What are you doing monthly? What are you doing yearly? And yearly is kind of like the big strategy, right? And so yearly is for my classes. Monthly is for the things that I need to maintain, but I don't need to do that often. Weekly is those things I need to do regularly, and daily is my number one priority. And for me right now, it's fitness.
Awesome. Well, and Chris, I think that I can speak for myself. Probably more happenstance, and that's probably not happens because we're all about logging everything and planning. So, but I think you just explained it a lot better than how Aaron and I pretty much do things for the most part. But I think that it's important to get a little more succinct in it, and I think that you made that a really good point. And I'll say this: I have Scott Jedlinski's Red Dot instructor class the end of October myself here,
Nice.
right down the street. So I'm pumped about that.
Yeah,
so I beefed
let me
up
know
my
how it
shooting.
goes.
Oh, I'll let you know for certain, buddy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I met Scott at the Rangemaster Tactical Conference for the first time in March of this year. Great guy. He actually came to my, I do a Rangemaster. I usually teach a folding knife, a progressive folding knife block. And he was a student of class, great student, great guy. And he and I talked a lot. And I found out he was coming to Vegas. And so I'm there. He's going to do his 1 day Appendix AIWB class and then 2 or 3 days of the instructor course. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Rock on.
So are you at TacCon this next year, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I just filled out all my paperwork. Yeah, I'll be doing, again, folding knife. There's everybody. I've been teaching shooting since I started my company in 98, but there's a lot of people that teach shooting. So I always try to pick something. Tiffany always asks me, do you want to do something different? And I go, well, nobody's doing knife, so I'll do knife again. There's plenty of good shooters, way better than me. So, I'll let them do that.
Well, Aaron and I this will be we always say this, we can't believe we're even admitting this is our first TacCon. But we'll be there and we'll do our best to get into your class, buddy. And
I can't wait.
We'll get to meet you and train with you.
Yeah. I guess all the guys, we're all planning on going again this year. So, everybody in the collective, I'm not sure if Paul will be able to make it, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'd love to meet you guys and train with you. It'd be great.
Oh, we're going to do it. And so I have to say, Aaron, so we'll probably close here now, unless you want to move in anything else, Aaron.
No, I think we have a lot more to talk about. So, Chris, whenever you can come on again soon, let's come on and we'll have some more of the jovial questions that we often get with, especially our first time interviewing somebody. But we'll get to those
Aaron,
next time.
That's. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's why I think it's a good time to end it with a little bit of jovial. Do you have a special shirt you're wearing?
Oh, it's funny you ask. You've had a very important personality on your podcast before, Larry Lindemann, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Larry's a good friend of mine. And in honor of him, I wore my Larry Shagru shirt today. I don't know if your viewers can see it, but That's Larry. And you don't want to
Awesome.
run into Larry with a pressurized tank. If he's walking
Not
with
at
any kind of
all.
pressurized tank, don't go near Larry.
See,
But
frankly, don't be in the same town as that dude.
yeah,
No kidding, man. I will tell you, man, that is, I like that book, especially. The book
yes,
is excellent.
all of
And the
his books are
movie.
good.
Yeah. And the movie is excellent as well. Yeah, that's great, man. That's awesome. Yeah, and the YouTube community will get to see it. We'll make
Yeah,
sure that Larry know. And so I'll close it with this. We had another special friend that said to pass on to you. Cecil said you suck.
yes. Well, Cecil's right about a lot of things. That maybe that's arguable, but yeah, Cecil's a very wise, very old man. So, he can say stuff like that. He looks a little bit like a raisin. So, he's entitled to at this stage in his life. I'm gonna let him say that.
Well, and I debated on even bringing it up because we barely know Chris, and Chris could freaking crush me. So I don't know if I want to say that, but you know what? um, damn, getting choked up is
Yeah.
of course
Th-
Cecil. As a brother of yours, he just wanted
Yeah,
to jab.
that's pretty much all we do when we all get together is just rip on each other the entire time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's like brothers, it's like growing up with
What?
brothers. I'm sure you too. I have two older brothers, and that's how it was. So,
Well, if it means anything to you, though, is part of this conversation was Cecil had listened to our Eric Gallhouse episode about
oh, your
shotguns, and
shotgun
he was,
episode, yeah,
yeah, and so he was texting. We've got a lot of feedback from that show, um, and Cecil was asking about a couple of guests and mentioning shotgun stuff, and then he said, "Hey, by the way, man, you guys need to have Chris Fry on." It's like,
And
incidentally, he's coming on tomorrow. So that's when he said it. He says, "Hey, tell Chris."
yeah.
So cool.
awesome.
Well, Aaron, I'll let you close it out, brother.
Well, Chris, real quick, give everybody a way they can get a hold of you, and that way we can call it a night and then book another show sometime soon.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at MDTS_training. That's primarily where I post nowadays. On Facebook, I'm on Facebook. I'm friends with a lot of people on Facebook, but the only thing I post on Facebook is food memes. So if you want some food memes, you can find me on Facebook. Here at Progressive Force Concepts, you guys can email me at fry@pfcgoc.com if you're coming to Vegas and you would like to catch a class. Our website is www.pfctraining.com. And I'm also on the PFC Training Instagram as well. So PFC_training. So those are primary places you can find me. And we have an 80 plus acre training facility south of Las Vegas that has a lot of distinguishing variables from other ranges that we can do fun stuff at. So if you're out here, check us out.
Awesome.
Well, Chris, every now and then I come through that area for work. I guarantee the next time I come through there, I'll take some leave en route and get with you as
Definitely.
well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for
Excellent.
having me on,
Excellent.
guys. I appreciate it.
Well, we thank you for
Yeah, have a
coming
good
on.
evening, Chris.
Take it easy, guys.
All right, guys. Thanks. Have a good night.